Hello and welcome back, everybody. Today on Learn Linux TV, we're going to take a look at how to create your very own Kubernetes cluster using the Raspberry Pi platform. So go ahead and click that like button, click that subscribe button, and we'll dive right in. Okay, now before we do get started, I want to address an elephant in the room that you guys are probably wondering about. This guy right here, what the heck is this? Well, I wanted to show it off in the video. It's called a cloudlet case, which basically allows you to dock 7 Raspberry Pi units in one case. It even has room for a switch on the bottom. Now, this case is definitely not required, but I wanted to show it to you guys in case you wanted some inspiration on something that you might want to purchase so that you can display your Raspberry Pis in a very cool way. Now, you definitely don't need something like this in order to build a Kubernetes cluster, but if you do want to make it look cool, this is just one idea that you could go along with. And if you search eBay and Amazon and things like that, you might find other solutions as well. But as far as what you do actually need, you will need at least 2 Raspberry Pi units. I recommend the Raspberry Pi 4. They are more powerful than the ones that have come before, so there's no reason to buy a 3 or below. I do recommend the Raspberry Pi 4. The 4 gig model is great if you can get that one. The 2 gig model is a good minimum if you can only get that, but the Raspberry Pi 4 with 4 gigabytes of RAM is the best option. You will also need an SD card for each Raspberry Pi, and of course, a power cord for each one. The Raspberry Pi 4 takes a very specific power supply. Without getting into too much detail, there's a design flaw that basically means it won't work with your average USB-C charger, but as long as you buy an official Raspberry Pi 4 charger, you should have no problems whatsoever. Now, I mentioned 2 Raspberry Pi units at least. You could have 5, you could have 10, you can have 100, but if you have 100, please show me a picture. I really want to see it. But basically, the only requirement is that you have at least 2, because you need 1 as the master, and then you need 1 worker node. And you can have additional worker nodes and even add even more additional worker nodes as you grow, which is what makes this platform extremely scalable. Now, what you'll also need is to download the Buster Lite edition of Raspbian. Raspbian is the most popular Linux distribution available for the Raspberry Pi platform, and the Buster Lite edition, what makes that different is that it doesn't include a graphical user interface at all, which works well for us because we want to leave as many system resources available to the Kubernetes software as we possibly can. It just basically has less overhead. You can use the tool Etcher to flash that downloaded image onto your SD card. You'll do that on each one. And then once you're all set, we'll go ahead and continue. If you don't already know how to use Etcher, I have a video on my channel that will show you that process. Now, I'm going to grab my laptop. I'll switch the camera over to that, and I'm going to show you how to prepare your Raspbian SD cards for use with Kubernetes. So we'll go ahead and get started. So here on the terminal, I'm going to show you a couple of quick things that are going to make this process a lot easier. So first of all, I'll do df-h, and that's going to show me the various storage volumes that I have attached to my computer. lsblk also works as well. Now, you should see boot and rootfs as 2 different mount points if you plug in your USB SD card reader or you put the SD card in your computer. Now again, this is assuming you've already used Etcher to create your SD cards. And when you insert it back into your computer, you should have these mount points. Now, first of all, we're going to, let's do lsblk, we're going to cd into run media username and then boot. And this can vary from one distribution to another if you're doing this from Linux. So just go ahead and use whatever path shows the boot directory. I'll press enter. And now I am in that directory. What I want to do is touch SSH just like that. Now what that's going to do is it's going to create a file called SSH. It's going to be 0 bytes. What this will do is cause the SSH service to be enabled the first time you start your Raspberry Pi with that SD card. So I recommend that you do this on each of them. Now, I'm going to go back to my home directory. So there's another change that I recommend you make that will make this process easier. So again, I'll do lsblk. And what I want to do is go ahead and cd into the directory rootfs. I'm going to basically paste the whole path. I'll cd into there. And then what you want to do is cd space etc. Make sure you don't put a / here. You want to leave the / out. Press enter. And we are going to edit a file, but we need sudo permissions. We can use the nano text editor. And the file we want to edit is hostname. I'll put in my sudo password here. And the default host name for the Raspberry Pi image is, well, Raspberry Pi. And this is going to be a little confusing because if you were to insert your SD cards into all of your Raspberry Pis and turn them on all at the same time, they will all be named the same. So let's go ahead and rename them before we turn them on. So this is the first one right here. I'm going to name it K8S Master, just like that. And if it was a worker node, you could do something like worker 01 or whatever naming convention you want. But basically, you want to change the name on each SD card so when the Raspberry Pis boot and you look at your DHCP server, you'll know immediately which ones are which when you go to connect to them. Now to make mine very obvious, I'm going to have this naming scheme right here. I'll just put LLTV in the name, and then I'll save the file. Then close out. Now there's one more file we want to edit. So again, sudo nano, and I am in the etc directory. So what I want to do is edit hosts. And you can see on the last line, we have that same default name. We're basically going to just change that to match whatever naming convention we decided to go along with. So I'll go ahead and make that the same in my case. And again, Control O, Enter, Control X. So in this point, I can just basically cd back to the home directory because I can't unmount the SD card when I am inside the SD card on the current working directory. And to keep it simple, we could simply open a file manager window here. And we could just make sure that we eject everything. And then what you'll do is repeat this process on each of your other SD cards. Go ahead and name them in both of those same files, and then unmount them when you're done, to ensure that each SD card has its own name. This video is proudly sponsored by Linode. I've trusted Linode for over 2.5 years as my infrastructure provider. Along the way, I've used them for all sorts of things, like my web server, for example. The wiki for this YouTube channel is also hosted on it, and I also use it for quite a few of the tutorials that you've enjoyed on my channel recently. I recommend Linode because it's simple to use, has affordable capped pricing that just makes sense, and reliable 24/7 support available by phone or support ticket. If you're a Linux power user, your server customization options are all but limitless. Even if you are just starting to learn, you can use Linode's growing list of one-click installations to easily get a site, app, or service up and running in the cloud. To get $20 in credit toward your new Linode account, use promo code LearnLinux19 at signup, or just visit the URL that you see on your screen right now. I'd like to give a special thank you to Linode for their support of my channel. Definitely go ahead and check them out. And now let's get back to the video. Okay, so after you do all that, you'll basically just insert the SD cards into your Raspberry Pi units, plug in an Ethernet cable, power them on, and after some time you should see them in your router under the DHCP table. So here's mine, for example. If I scroll down, now the names of my Raspberry Pi units are going to be overridden in DHCP because I have a static lease for those. But basically, you should see the host name. We can see a couple of mine here. And the 3 that I am going to set up are each online. So basically, in your case, you should have whatever name you gave your Raspberry Pi units listed in the DHCP server address table of your router, and that will give you the IP address that those units were assigned. You can see mine right here on the left. So then what you do is you go ahead and just copy one of the IP addresses. So I'll just start with the master. Go ahead and copy that. Now in the terminal, you could do ssh pi at, and then paste the IP address right here. I'll say yes to accept. The default password for Raspberry Pi installations is Raspberry. We can see the name that I have chosen for the master is right here. So I'll open a new tab. Go back to the DHCP table. Go ahead and copy this IP right here. And again, my names are only showing different because I override that in my DHCP server. I'm sure yours will be a lot easier. Basically, again, just look for the name. Back in the terminal, I'll do ssh pi at, paste the IP in there. Raspberry for the password. Now I am connected to the first worker node, and I'll do a new tab yet again, and then I'll copy the IP address. Again, you know the drill. And now I have a shell session open for the master, the first worker node, and the second worker node. If you have more than 2, then of course you'll just repeat this process for each of those. Now, most of the commands that I'm going to give you will need to be run on each of the Raspberry Pis. If something only needs to be run on a particular Raspberry Pi, I will let you know. Now, first of all, what we want to do is go ahead and update the system. So we could do sudo apt update && sudo apt dist upgrade. What this is going to do is it's going to resynchronize with the package repositories. And if this command here is successful, then it's going to chain into the second command, which the dist upgrade will actually install the updated packages. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. And I'm going to paste this command on each. I'm going to press enter, and then press enter and enter. As you can see, in my case, it wants to update 67 packages, and it will require 7 new ones. So I'll press enter to confirm, and I will do that on each of these tabs. And I will be right back as soon as this is complete. If we see a message like this, we can simply type Q to break out of that message and let the process continue. All right, so all the packages are up to date on this one at least. Let's check the others. And it looks like they are all complete as well. Now that we've installed all of the updates, we actually do need to reboot each of these nodes, but we're not going to do that just yet. What we're going to do right now is we need to edit a text file. And this is the text file we need to edit right here. Again, we need to do this on each of the Raspberry Pi machines here. So just press enter on each one. So now we should have the same file open on each Raspberry Pi. Now what we need to do is go to the end of this line right here. Press space, and then we need to paste this right here, which it looked like it kind of wrapped a little bit here. I'm going to press enter so you can see what I just pasted there at the end, but you don't press enter. It all needs to be on the same line. Go ahead and pause the video if you need to. I have a wiki article linked below that will have a list of all the commands in case you need to copy and paste them. But again, this needs to be on the same line. I just wanted you to be able to see it. So it's basically going to look like this. You have root wait, space, and then you have the start of the new options that I have added. Then you do Control O and then enter, to save it, and then Control X to exit out. And then you just repeat on each one of your other nodes. Now each of those nodes should have that new configuration added. We basically just needed to make some cgroup changes. Now a few more things before we reboot. There's one problem we need to solve, and that problem is swap is enabled. If you do free-m, which shows you the available memory that's free, we actually do have some swap space here, only 99 megabytes in my case, but you actually should not have swap at all whatsoever. We need to disable that, and in fact, if we don't, it'll actually complain when we go to install Kubernetes. So I'll clear the screen, and there's a couple commands we will run to solve that. So it's this one right here. This command will actually turn swap off. And now if I do free-m, we have zeros right here across the board. That means swap is turned off. Unfortunately, when we reboot the Pi, swap will be re-enabled again. We'll get to that point in a moment. We'll fix that too. But I'm going to run that command on each. Easy peasy. So to make sure that the swap file doesn't ever return, couple commands to run, but first of all, we're going to run this one, which will remove the swap file completely. Easy enough. And to be very sure the swap file can't come back, we're going to completely nuke it with this command right here. We're actually going to remove the package that creates the swap file in the first place. So that's going to remove a package. And again, same thing on each. All right, so now that the swap file is disabled, we still need to reboot because we did run some updates here. So we can run sudo reboot on each one of these nodes here. Go ahead and give them a restart. And then basically we just wait a few minutes for those to come back up. Depending on the speed of your SD card, shouldn't take more than a minute or two at the most. So just give it a moment and we will try to SSH back into those instances. Okay, let's see if enough time has passed. I'll press the up arrow. Basically, I'm going to recall the SSH command that we used to connect to the instances in the first place. So enter, default password again of Raspberry. Then we'll repeat on each one of the other tabs here. And we should be connected to each node yet again. And we can confirm that they actually did restart by issuing the uptime command. And we can see that it actually did reboot because the uptime is about a minute. And now we can go ahead and install Docker. I'll paste the command right here. You can go ahead and pause the screen if you need to. But again, I have all the commands in the wiki article linked in the description below. And since we need to run this on each node, I'll go ahead and paste it on those as well, and then press enter. So now Docker should be installed. We can confirm by looking at the other tabs. And sure enough, it looks successful to me. So next, what you could do is copy this command right here. This will add your user to the Docker group. If you created another user, you'll need to adjust the username accordingly, but if you are following along with me, you should be able to copy that command as is. Go ahead and paste that in, press enter, and then disconnect. So I just did Control D to log out. I'll do the same thing here. Control D or type exit, and then enter to log out. And then also on this one as well. And now we just basically go back in. And we are back into our instances. And the reason why we did that is because we wanted to make the changes to our groups take effect. We wanted the Pi user to be a member of the Docker group. And we need to log out and log in for that to take effect. So now what we need to do is edit a text file on each node. I'll go ahead and paste the command right here. So sudo, because we need root privileges, we can use nano. You could use whatever text editor you want. And it's etc docker daemon.json. And in my case, this file is going to come up as an actual file with contents in it. But in your case, it's most likely going to be empty. So I'll press enter. And here's the contents of that file. Now go ahead and pause this screen if you need to, or you can just grab the contents of this file in the link in the description below. Then you can do Control-O and then enter to save it, Control-X to exit out. And again, do that on each of your nodes. Now on my end, I already took care of it, and I have added that file to each. So now all that's left is to do one more reboot. I'll do that on each machine. And then give them a moment to come back up. All right, back into each node, we can go ahead and continue. Now again, what I'm about to show you needs to be done on each node. So I'll go ahead and paste the command right here. So what we're doing right here is we are editing yet another text file. And basically what we're doing is we are adding the Kubernetes repository to each Raspberry Pi. And now we have the same file open in each of these. And then what we're going to do is go ahead and paste in this line right here. This is the repository URL for installing Kubernetes. And you can ignore the fact that it says Xennial right here. This is the correct repository for the Raspberry Pi. So I'll do Control-O and then enter, Control-X. And I'll go ahead and repeat the process here and here. And we should be good to go for that. But the repository will not work without the key. So the command for that is this one right here. We're going to curl the apt GPG key, and we're going to pipe it into sudo apt key add, which is going to add that repository key to our system. So enter, paste, and then enter. And we'll do the same thing here as well. All right. So far, so good. So now that we have installed that repository, we do need to refresh our package index. So sudo apt update. And we'll do that over here. And over here as well. Now sometimes I do see this error once in a while. I am not sure why. Let's go ahead and give that another shot. And it was able to work properly when I tried it again. There might be some kind of rate limiting on this repository. I'm not exactly sure. So if you see an error, just give it a moment and then try again. As you can see, it worked just fine there, and it worked just fine on the first one as well. Okay, so now we have the repository. The repository is synchronized. It's time to install some packages. So yet again, I'll paste yet another command. And using the apt package manager, we are installing kubeadm, kubecontrol, and the kubelet packages. So we're installing all three of these in one shot. So you basically just press enter. Enter again to accept the default of yes, and we're going to repeat on each node. Say yes when it asks. And basically just wait for it to finish. So that one's done. That one's done. And great, we're all set. So this command is interesting because the one I'm about to show you should only be run on the master. Just this one right here. We are not going to repeat it on the other nodes, only this one. And I'm going to go ahead and paste the command. And here is that command. Now to go too into detail about this particular command is beyond the scope of this video. But essentially what we're doing is we are setting up the pod network and the service network for our Kubernetes cluster. And for the domain, I just have a sample mydomain.com. So if you have a company or something like that, an actual company domain, you could consider putting that in right here. And I'm going to go ahead and press enter. And I'll go ahead and let this finish. All right, so that's all set, and that can take a while depending on how fast of an SD card you have and other factors. It could take a little while. Now, the most important part of this output is this end part right here. This is going to differ from one person to the next, so yours will not look exactly like mine. But we are going to need this actually. We're not going to use it right now, but we do want to make a note of this. So I'll just copy this text, and then I'll just open a text editor window here, and I'll make a note of this. Now you do want to be a little bit protective of this because you don't want this join command to fall into the wrong hands. You especially don't want to show it on a video that thousands of people are going to watch because you don't want any rogue nodes joining your cluster. In my case, I'm going to delete it anyway, so I really don't care. And I figured it would be cool for you to see exactly what that looks like. So I'm not going to save this file. I'm just going to put it aside for now. Now also, you are going to see some commands that you will need to run, like these right here. We do need to run those commands actually. And those commands we are going to run here on the master. So what I'm going to do is copy the first one. I'll paste it in, enter. I'll scroll and get the other commands here. So I'll get the second one, copy that, paste that one as well, press enter. And as you can expect, we're going to go ahead and get the third one here. Copy that, paste, and enter. All right, so we've run everything there that we need to, so I'll clear the screen. Now what we need to do is install a network driver. So I'll paste that command in right here. And the first thing you'll notice is that I did not use sudo. I don't have sudo in the front of this command. That's actually intentional. And again, all the commands will be in the link in the description below. You can pause the video if you would like to. And then when you're ready, you go ahead and press enter. That should deploy the pod network. And you know, that was actually pretty quick. Now we need to make sure that all of the pods that the previous command will create come up properly. So I'll paste the next command. We're going to use kube control. And the more you get into Kubernetes, the more you'll understand what that means. But basically, we're going to use this utility. We're going to get pods of all namespaces. I'll press enter. And my output is wrapped here, but we can see that each of these are running. If you have any errors here, then you may have done something wrong. Everything should be running. So that means basically that our pod network has been deployed. So I'll clear the screen. And now the moment of truth. I'm going to recall the join command from a previous step. I'm going to copy it. And we are going to run this on the nodes, not the master. So I'll go on node number 1. Now to join a node to the cluster, I will need to use sudo. Then I type space, and then I'm going to paste the join command there. Press enter. And now the verbiage leads me to believe that this was successful. So I'll go back here to the master. Then I'll type kubectl get nodes. And would you look at that? We actually have the node right here that we have added to the cluster, our first node. It's not ready yet, but it did actually go ahead and add it. So we can just basically run that command again to see if the status changes. And we'll do that periodically until it says ready, and it does actually already say ready in my case. So we do have the master. Well, of course we have the master, but we also have our first node added to the cluster. So then we can go into the next node. We can do sudo space and then paste the command back in again. And there it is. I'll press enter. And that's running. I'll switch back over to the master. And eventually, it's going to start showing the other node. We only have the first one so far. So I'll give it a moment. Let's try it again. And sure enough, we have the second node added to the cluster. If you have more than 2 worker nodes, then you'll just repeat the same process on each one, and then check and make sure that they get a ready status. And if it doesn't show ready, you basically just wait a few moments and try again. And now both of my nodes are ready and have successfully joined my Kubernetes cluster. Well, there you go. We have successfully created our very own Raspberry Pi based Kubernetes cluster. How awesome is that? Now from here, you can go ahead and run your containers on this cluster. And if this is a topic you guys want to see more content about, if I see the interest in the numbers and you guys give this enough likes, I am going to consider doing more Kubernetes videos for you guys. So subscribe to my channel and let me know if this is content that you would like to see more of. And regardless, I have awesome videos coming, guys. I can't wait to show you. So stay tuned, and I'll see you again real soon.